Good morning. My esteemed colleagues on the dais and off it, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, great pleasure to be here. Since I've joined the Defense Ministry fairly recently, I still feel quite a bit like an outsider in many ways. And therefore, I will avoid making a normal, prepared, anodyne speech and talk as an outsider and in terms of issues that might look a little bit controversial at times. First of all, I want to say that India is on the cusp of a great transformation. We've finally reached a stage where after liberalization, it took us about 16 to 17 years to cross $1 trillion in our GDP. Thereafter, it took us 7 years to reach the $2 trillion mark, which happened in 2014-15. It took us another 7 years to hit the $3 trillion mark in 21-22. Thereafter, in 3 years, we'll cross $4 trillion. Thereafter, we'll be adding $0.75 trillion to our economy every second year. So this notion that resources are not there and we are resource constrained, let's throw it out of the window. There's adequate money available for what we want to do. We need to have the pragmatism to go for the prioritized solutions that we need. Today, we are spending just 1.9% of our GDP on defense. We can easily, with a 7.6% rate of growth in our GDP, even a 2% share is proving very, very difficult for us to spend because of the lack of domestic absorptive capacity. So resources are no longer a constraint. We need to find pragmatic solutions and make them work. One of the problems in aerospace in particular, and the topic of today, which is Atmanirbharta, is I always feel that when it comes to the Air Force, Atmanirbharta is sometimes a source of as much angst as it is a source of, commitment or passion. There is a feeling that sometimes there is a trade-off with capability, and I don't blame you for that. The fact is that in India, we've not been able to develop many critical technologies. Jet engines was mentioned, radars, etc. Part of the problem is that as a country, we've transitioned directly from a primary sector economy to a service sector-led economy, which throws up over 50% of our budget. Our manufacturing base is large. It is still the fifth largest in the world, but it's still relatively small as a percentage of our economy, just 15 to 16%. And that lack of a wide industrial base combined with inability to do real mass production in many commodities is one of the reasons why we've not been able to make the kind of breakthroughs in aerospace in particular as we have in some of the other areas of defense like land systems, which is closely linked to our automobile space or even in missiles. So how do we get out of this mindset and this feeling that resources is a problem, or what is it that in our current management system which makes it difficult for us to achieve these, the kind of breakthrough that we need? And I want to give you another provocative statement. This is by a guy called Bill Greenwald, who's a defense analyst based in the US. And he was speaking about the defense industry of the US, which is again dominated by a few large players, 6 or 7 of them. Only one major incumbent has made it into that list over the last 30-odd years. What he said was that this ideology of defense management, which is deeply ingrained in culture, process, law, and regulation, is based on the concepts of scientific management that were once fashionable in the Soviet Union and were at the vanguard of the 1950s US auto industry before it was outcompeted by Japan in the 1970s. Centralized, predictive program budgeting, management, and oversight were then thought to be superior to the trial and error and messiness of time-constrained, decentralized experimentation and the seemingly wastefulness of having multiple sources rapidly prototyping potential solutions. I think that in some ways that fits our systems as well. What is happening in our country is that our procurement policy, for example, for a long time has been, again, I'm saying as a kind of a dispassionate observer, now I'm part of it and we need to find solutions for it, but the procurement policy in many ways was broken. And I make no secret of that. It's true. We've not been able to do things on time. The timelines we've given ourselves are too luxurious. Very basic things like preparing RFPs in time, even before you go for a AON, were not being done. Thereafter, as all of you know, we have been gold-plating our requirements in many cases, and thereafter ensuring that our evaluation processes were too long, all of that. I think all of you are aware of that. It's time to call a spade a spade. We have to move on to a different approach. The notion that, as was mentioned by this particular statement that I quoted just now, he also cited the example in particular of SpaceX, where in terms of launch costs, it was able to outcompete NASA by 85% in a few years. And that is the beauty of ensuring that you open up any sector to competition. And that is the next part of what I want to talk about. The procurement side, we will tackle over the course of the next 6 months to 1 year, both in terms of the process timelines and in terms of the procedures themselves. But I want to come to the next part of it, which is where the advantage that incumbents have in our system and the entry barriers that we create for new entrants. That is the other area that we really need to tackle. Our industrial policy is such that our defense industry is the last vestige of the license permit Raj. We still have licensing, industrial licensing, perhaps inevitable, but needs to be much faster. When people want to export, we create so many hurdles for them that it's a real challenge when it comes to ease of doing business. And most of all, because we have a monopsony on the one hand of the government being a single buyer and quasi-monopolies on the other side in terms of one or two public sector companies or in some cases now some large private sector companies, we are not able to get enough competition. The intention has to be that the vendors which are now becoming part of our ecosystem, the industrial base for defense manufacturing in this country now has expanded over the last 10 years or so. We have 16 DPSUs, including the corporatized ordnance factory companies. We have 430 licensed companies, and we have 16,000 MSMEs. We need to ensure that these MSMEs, the vendors, the people whom the bigger players use for their component manufacturing, etc., they should be able to see a future where they are able to go up the manufacturing value chain and become as big themselves. That is the challenge that we need to create in our system by moving on from cost-plus budgeting and cost-plus orders to competitive commercial orders by emphasizing and enhancing competition. And that is the only way that we are going to be able to bring in innovations faster and ensure the best value for money. We now have the world's third largest startup ecosystem. Many of them want to get into this space. Many are getting into this space. We need to give them a level playing field, which we always talk about. We need to give them visibility in terms of orders, and then they will be able to provide the solutions that we need to move faster on some of these critical technologies that have been lacking in India so far. In terms of our policies, when it comes to FDI, for example, we've already created a very liberal policy, up to 74% automatic route. So far, we've got only one company which has actually come in that with 100% FDI, which is Saab. But I know there will be more, and we will have to utilize our buying power as a nation to use models like the strategic partnership, as we've done recently for the transport aircraft, to bring in global OEMs to set up base in India, to use transfer of technology mechanisms in the short and medium term where we don't have critical technologies available right now. And in the longer run, of course, with the help of DRDO, we move on to hopefully develop indigenous technologies of our own. The DCP and SP models both look very promising, and I hope we can sort of replicate that across the defense domain and particularly the aerospace domain. That is the only way we can make the kind of breakthrough we need when it comes to the challenges that the Indian Air Force faces in terms of the capability gaps that have emerged. We'll have to sort of be very pragmatic. Ultimately, public policy making is about optimizing from among the constrained choices that you have. You will have to go in for global buys as you also try to sort of develop your indigenous supply lines. And as we do so, hopefully we will eventually create a large manufacturing ecosystem that can sustain us through complete or near complete Atmanirbharta. With those few words, thank you for your attention, and I look forward to hearing about the conclusions of your seminar. Thank you very much.